with more influence. Sherri and Lou, how are you all doing today?
Doing excellent, Vinay.
Good.
Nice to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you too. So did I frame that up properly? I mean, it's about this perspective and mindset shift
Uh-huh.
or leadership, and that's what you all do. Is that the right way to characterize it?
I agree 100%. In the words of one of our mentors, John Maxwell, it's a leader shift. You know, we've got to look at it different, from a different angle, different perspective. I was just having this conversation with one of our clients just literally before we got on this, and is that kind of like that A Nightmare Before Christmas character where he spins his head and it's a different face. I don't remember, forget the name of that character. The mayor.
Oh.
Yes, the mayor. Well, you see, we've got now obviously the negative faces we've got to adjust, but we have to be able to pivot and shift, but we can't do that if we don't know how or where or what to do. So that's where this data really adds value.
So I get a scenario I'd like to play out here, and I don't know that anybody's ever thought of this before. At least I haven't heard of it. And it's this idea that, gosh, if I'm leading an organization, do I have the right people in place, or am I the right person? Sometimes is something I've asked myself.
Yeah.
And how neat would it be, like, video games where you can drop and change characters and drop people into different situations? What if you could drop a different manager into the same exact situation in a company? Would that change anything? Would it get better or worse? Is it really just that? Well, I mean, what actually causes the output? Is it, how much does it have to do with the individual in that leadership or that management role?
Right.
So I want to show you what that could look like with data where we drop different managers into that same role for the same people, and show you how much divergence there is. But do you all have any guesses as to what you're going to see? Give me your best guess as what do you think will happen when we drop different people in the same situation?
Wow. Well, you're gonna, yeah. I mean, well, just you're going to see variance. You're going to see variance, and there's reasons why you'll see variance. So number one, and again, it's the conversation I have a lot, is that when it comes down to industries, right? It doesn't matter what industry you're in, people are involved. When there's people involved, it's just going to look different, but there's going to be differences.
Yeah. So let me go ahead and share my screen here, because you guys know I love my data and I've always got a visualization to share. So what I'm going to share with you is what I call an employee priority and alignment assessment. And basically, as I share my screen here, you will see what that means. Can you all see my screen over here?
Sure can.
So for anyone who's looking at this for the first time, this is the priority and alignment assessment. These are the responses that came back. And we've got a number of employees that we've got over time, with various levels of experience, 2 to 3 years, 4 to 8 years, 8+ years, one year or less. And we've got a series of managers that we have here. Right now, this is based on their email address, but the person's name is Brad. When I look at Brad, I see Brad compared to this employee, Jay Gilbert. And we can kind of see how they rack. In this case, it's for industry-specific questionnaire, how they rack and stack the priority and ultimately the alignment. You can see there's differences. Employee 1 believes that, in this case, Jay Gilbert believes that appearance is number 4 on the priority list, 4th most important. Manager thinks it's 5. Chemical safety, employee Jay Gilbert believes it's 1. Manager believes it's 3. 7 versus 1. You can see these differences. Some of these things are kind of in the same ballpark, but yet they're different. So, I'm going to give you an analogy here. If I told all my kids, hey, kids and wife, we're all going on vacation together, and they go, great, they'll immediately have an idea in their own head. My youngest probably thinks it's the ice cream store. My oldest thinks it's the Lego store. And my middle one thinks it's her friend's house. My wife thinks that we're probably going to the gardening store. And I think we're going to the racetrack. We're all going different ways already.
Uh-huh.
And the goal of the manager or the leader here is actually to get everybody to see the same thing. No, we're talking about going to Disney World.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah.
How does that resonate? Have you seen that misalignment between people, that lack of clarity? And what does that cause in your experience?
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, here's a good, just looking even at these numbers. I mean, without the right, let's just be transparent and real. Unless you've had training and understanding effective communication with those that you lead or with people in general, unless you've had that type of training and practice, you're not going to be good at it. You're just not going to be good at it. That's our human condition does not come fully equipped with perfect communication. It just doesn't. That is a major flaw, and it is one of those things that we don't tend to be taught well enough. So that being the case, any messaging that we are going to be needing to provide to those that we lead on our teams and our company, if we're at the C-suite level, our departments, is going to come with caveats. And those caveats are completely engulfed in the realm of communication, in the realm of being able to relay it to where everybody else is on the same page. And I will promise you that one message out to them is not going to make that happen. It's going to come with other things like consistent approaches, identifying using data. Are they still hearing it after turnover? Are they still hearing the same message? Or is the message still the same? Or did you neglect and forget to send out the memo when we changed our mission statement? I mean, these are the things that happen all the time. Someone who's been with a company for 15 years, someone who started the company just 2 years ago. I'll promise you money, if we don't have the right communication, the effective way to find out if there's a misalignment, both of those two people are going to have different ideas on where the company and department's going.
So I want to dig into this a little bit more. So what we've done is we've scored Jay Gilbert versus their manager or their leader. And out of score of 0 to 100, they've got a 28. And you can look at this graph over here. The gray area is the manager in this case, and the blue area is the employee. You can see this little area of overlap is really all of their overlap. There's a significant area that they're just seeing things different. So they can be making different decisions. Yeah. But as we go through this list here, we can start to see some people that are highly aligned, some people that are lowly aligned. Mm-hmm. What do you see in this ability to score someone and being able to kind of put a number and maybe a visual? Because I love this idea of a picture says 1,000 words and saves a heck of a lot of time. What does this tell you in terms of, in this case, this manager's ability to start to, where do they pay attention? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, you can always tell that the manager is always about profitability. That's a clear on this anyway. And then there's a huge communication with the office. I mean, there's a discrepancy with that. As employees, they always have seen, again, it comes back to that communication, right? And there's where the gaps are. And there's where people fall away, and it could be just completely erode on the culture and finger pointing, the whole thing, right? So profitability is usually at the manager level, but not in the employee. The employee doesn't look at profitability. However, they do look at metrics. We all know about metrics because they're tangible. So something like this is super helpful when it comes to these type of qualities that we're looking at, because then both sides can look at it and say, okay, here is a concrete number, and here's where we're off, and here's where we're aligned. Mm-hmm. Then that's a starting point, and then you could start dissecting it from there.
You got to know where you are first before you can decide where you're going to go next, right? I mean,
right.
Of course, yeah. It's like the GPS, right? Mm-hmm. If you don't put in your starting point, you put your end point in. It's like you're not gonna know where to go, and the GPS isn't gonna know this.
And believe me, I've tried to put in the destination, and GPS says, "Do you want to tell me where you are first?"
Yeah, tell me where you're at.
Tell you what road to take if I have no idea where you are right now.
That's right.
Your location.
That's right. We can take a guess.
Yeah.
We can certainly throw out a random address, right? We could do that, but it may or may not get there.
So I want to do here what I'll call the video game piece of this, right? Where I'm going to swap out a character. So you can see that across all these different people here, this particular manager has got an overall score of a 42. That means across all these people, the average value and in terms of effectiveness as a leader, in their effectiveness of communication is a 42 out of 100. I think there's some room for improvement here. Let's go swap someone else out and let's see how they show up. They're a little different. You can see this graph is different. So the same employee with that different person dropped into that role, you can see how there's a lot more overlap here. 79 versus what I think it was like a 28 before.
Yeah, right.
So different leader in the same position actually gets more alignment. We were looking at a score in the low 40s. Now we're looking in the mid 50s. You can start to see the numbers have started to sneak up. You got a couple of people who are still not completely aligned. Are there any felt senses or gut feelings that come up when you're able to see it like this and take this person out and drop someone on, like with the video game effect here?
Well, you get to see that it's that there's, again, this is they're different experiences with the same questions, with the same data we're trying to pull, but the experiences are different. The messaging is different in some way. There's something there that's different. And what this data tells us is that there's something different. There's a misalignment in some of these things with some of these employees, these team members with the manager. We're not saying team members at fault, managers at fault. That's the data doesn't necessarily say who's at fault. Okay, that comes with a little bit more digging. But it doesn't really matter who's at fault. What matters is what's the resolution. And a lot of times it comes down to, well, where's the responsibility fall? And ultimately it falls on the leader. That's what it comes down to ultimately. But this doesn't tell us that the messaging is being heard correctly or incorrectly. We just know that it's being heard differently at this point.
So that, I mean, the analogy I'm thinking of here when you're saying that is when I've got minus 500 in my bank account, that doesn't necessarily mean it's my fault because someone else had promised me that they were going to deposit money. My company was supposed to deposit money or send out payroll. It was supposed to have hit the bank account. So it may not necessarily be my fault. I'm a party to it, but the connect, we missed each other, right? Is the point there. And the data, the negative $500 balance tells, hey, there's something wrong here. It doesn't say that I'm at fault or the other person's at fault. It's rather just that, hey, there's something that we need to spend some time investigating and paying attention to right here. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. There's definitely something there that needs to be, it narrows it down enough for us to be able to begin asking the right questions.
Because if, the way I think of it is, I'm just going to look at this idea of whether it's chemical safety or just safety in general, right? In this place, they're both aligned. If both the employee and the manager are aligned, well, I think that's a good thing. They both see that safety is number one. Let's see if there's a little difference here, 1 versus 3 or, 1 versus 3. I'm just come up with different people, 1 versus 4. You can kind of see how, if this safety component is different, how they make decisions differently as managers and what the employee desires or believes it is and what the manager desires or believes it is are different. They're not aligned. Therefore, decision making will be different. The employee is not going to do what the manager wants because they don't know what the manager wants.
That's right. And here's an interesting thing about this. What's good about this data is, let's just hypothetically say that this company was trying to figure out why their insurance claims are high from chemical burns. Well, looking at this, it seems that generally speaking, everyone we've seen, the employee doesn't find chemical safety that important. Whereas the managers kind of do, which means that most likely the messaging hasn't been clear enough or the training hasn't been clear enough from beyond the manager. So, so just to give some value to just a piece of this, and we can go into that from profitability, you name it. I mean, this is the value of this data.
So I'm going to stop sharing because I think enough video games for right now. Because I want to come back to this idea of leaders and leading with influence, because there are 10 principles that you all use on a regular basis to help those leaders lead with influence. Can you tell me about that and kind of maybe what principles would you say apply here?
Yeah, well, the 10 principles that Sherri and I and our company, the Lever Group, have come up with. This is based upon 5 decades or so of our combined experience in leadership and development. And these 10 principles are what we believe that every leader must follow that to lead with influence. And influence really ultimately is really what drives people one direction or another. And so if we want to use our influence on purpose, these are the 10 principles. And one of those principles that I think fits really good here is the willing principle. Because we have to be willing as leaders, particularly when it comes to data, to dive in and take a tool like this, Vinay, that you and your company are that have at the disposal of other businesses and companies. Be willing and open to the possibilities that you need change, and we can be willing to be open to that. Then growth is going to happen. We have to experience the possibilities of looking at something like this data to identify where the challenges are. It's funny. The other day, I heard this. I was working with a client in this company. It's 5.5 years old, so they're still fairly new, and they want to send a company survey out, and it's just a generalized survey about a couple of items. And one of the questions at the end was, "Tell us anything else you'd like to express about the culture." And they had asked me, should we include that? We're kind of worried to include that question. And I says, well, what are you worried about? Are you worried that you're going to learn something that you didn't want to learn? Are you worried that or are you to look at this differently? How about this? Let me ask you a question. Do you want to know the possibilities that you have in growing further as a business? If the answer to that is yes, then that question needs to stay.
Or they're afraid because they already know that there's opportunities and they don't want to face it.
There's the other side of it too, is that we know there's problems. We just can't figure out how to identify it.
Mhm.
And this is where the data comes in. This is the importance of this. Now you can identify it. You can then ask these kinds of questions, being okay with that coming in, because now you know the right questions to ask so that you can get the right data.
And that's why I think I love data so much, is because it's objective, it's unbiased. It's not been tainted, right?
You
It
can't
doesn't
argue with
tell you anything. It just tells you what it is. That's it.
That's it.
Mhm.
Yeah, exactly. Very clear.
And that's where smart people, leaders and people that work in companies have the opportunity to start to look at it and say, huh, am I seeing things the right way or not? And I think that's the question to ask.
That's
So,
it. Yeah.
well, for those who have listened in, hopefully you got a chance to see that with a little bit of data, you can start to find out how aligned people are, because you can keep saying, hey, go left. But if they're standing on your left, they're already saying, I'm already left. What do you mean go left?
Uh-huh.
It doesn't make sense to them from where they're standing. And sometimes you may be communicating messages to them that doesn't make any sense to them. You're just Charlie Brown on a chalkboard, Charlie Brown's teacher on a chalkboard.
Yeah.
Wah, 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 wah. This is a way to see it. And if you need to change the culture in your company, that's what Sherri and Lou can help you do. So you can communicate those changes more effectively to people. So thanks for listening in, Sherri and Lou, as always. Love spending time with you all.
You as well,
Yeah, me
Vinay.
too.
Thank you.
See ya.